Hello everyone, I'm Leslie Maltman and welcome to Reimagining Events. This series of webinars has been developed by Tourism NI to support the events industry as we look forward to a time in the not too distant future where we can once again get together to share the live experiences we all miss so much. We know we need to look at things in a different way and from a new perspective, and these sessions are designed to help us navigate the way ahead in a post-pandemic world. Today's webinar looks at PR and is being delivered by Mary O'Leary. A fellow of the Public Relations Institute of Ireland, Mary has headed up O'Leary PR and Marketing for over 25 years, working with a variety of sectors including tourism and hospitality. Mary loves to travel, and while she's missed visiting far-flung destinations, she's relished the opportunity lockdown has given her to explore what's right on her doorstep. From a young age, she's been fascinated with coastline, beaches, and nature in countryside. And while West Cork is her favourite place to visit, I'll say she'll find our Northern Irish landscape a great place to holiday once restrictions allow. Mary's going to take us through her presentation and then there'll be a Q&A session. Thanks to those who've submitted questions in advance, and please do feel free to ask any further ones in the chat as we go along. Without further ado, Mary, over to you.
Well, thank you, Leslie, and I am looking forward to travelling to Northern Ireland once we get out of lockdown. We just heard the good news here today in Dublin that we'll be allowed to travel around the county, so it's a good first step. Well, thank you all for joining us here on this session, Reimagining PR. As we all know too well, the impact of the pandemic has affected all sectors of business, from retail and hospitality to tourism, travel, culture, sports and events that are associated with them. Some sectors have paused and put on hold. Others have pivoted successfully by moving online with e-commerce and virtual events, while others have reinvented themselves by introducing innovative offerings and products that are reaching a wider global audience. We've webinars like this one, award ceremonies, art exhibitions, concerts, comedy sessions and virtual tours. They've all come to the fore. However, the reality is income and public funding are under pressure and in cases radically reduced. The first thing in a crisis to get cut is marketing. However, this can really be counterproductive as it's the very time when your event or your business needs to be marketed. I'm sorry, now I didn't move forward there. We'll catch up myself here. PR, or public relations, is a resilient marketing tool that can be cost effectively used to promote an event and can work in tandem with other marketing functions to deliver awareness, encourage attendance and sales. There's a lot of misconceptions about what PR is. So in this webinar, I'm going to give you an overview of PR's role in the marketing mix and take you through a step-by-step on how to use it to support your business and event. This slide here is research that was announced last week, and although it relates to the Republic of Ireland, it is reflective of other markets, including Northern Ireland and the UK. This shows the area of marketing spend over the past 12 months. There's an increased focus there on the top line in digital advertising, while traditional advertising in print and TV has suffered. You'll see there that the spend for both online and offline events has dropped by 10% to 30% since 2019. And you'll see there that PR is sitting in there at 22% of the spend. Just while we look at this overview in terms of marketing, on so many occasions, I've seen budgets for events that have had no allocation for PR. There could be 20,000 available for advertising. However, the organisers or you organisers are missing a trick, because if 20% or £4,000 was directed towards PR, the return on investment would potentially be worth multiples of that amount in terms of the exposure and the reach to a wider cross-section of people with different interests. So let's just take a look at the marketing functions. All of these functions operate independently. However, there is a synergy between them. And the combination of these different functions to be used as part of a campaign will be designed around the available budget. And very importantly, based on the key target audiences that the campaign wants to reach. So we've advertising. There's traditional print advertising in magazines and newspapers, on TV, on radio, and out of home, which would be poster sites around the towns and cities, and in shopping centres, and then of course on buses. We've digital advertising, which is placed on the online sites where you see the ads popping up as you're scrolling through the internet. And then the most obvious takeovers where the content you're looking at is wrapped with a brand. Digital marketing, or optimizing your search word with the likes of Google AdWords, directs people to your website and social media channels. It's a very targeted approach and it works on the basis of the algorithm. Then we have social media with Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Reels. These platforms have grown exponentially in recent years. Then we have the influencers who are directly linked to social media, and these have grown really in popularity over the past 8 years, and they've become an industry in their own right. These influencers now charge fees for promoting products and services and are now considered to be an advertising platform in their own right. Then we come to public relations. And public relations is a flexible function that works across the traditional and digital media platforms, social media, influencer marketing, and advertising. It has a flexibility that it crosses over all of these functions. Now, although I've been in the industry a long time, I still find that there's plenty of confusion over what advertising is and what is PR. So I'm going to focus on pointing out some of the key differences here. The first difference is budget. Advertising is above the line and PR is below the line. You could see this reflected in the spend chart that I just showed, where advertising had significant budgets. Over 60% of a marketing budget would go on advertising, and PR was in at 22%, so it's radically lower. So sometimes it's referred to as a low-cost platform. The second most important difference is the content and style of the information. Advertising is very much a selling tool. You buy the space, you control the message. PR is the telling tool, and the goal is to create newsworthy content to secure editorial. However, as there's no budget, there's also no guarantees. So that's important to keep in mind. I've just put this front page up here because I think it clearly demonstrates the difference. You'll see here on the right-hand corner is a bought and paid for ad. It's secured, it's bought for the front page of this paper. The image of the sheep is very much a PR style shot, and it's telling a story in its own way. The fact is that most of the articles here on this front page would have PR behind them, whether they're a press officer in a government department or they're a PR consultant of an organisation. They've liaised with the journalist on these stories. And then we have the advertorial, and this is a combination of both buying space with advertising budget, normally at a reduced cost, and featuring editorial content with images so it looks and presents as editorial. Just to kind of show a little bit more of the differences. On the right here we have PR. It's appearing as editorial, so all of the pieces in bite size are PR driven, as in Staycation's return. These are all, this content has been supplied by PR consultants to the journalist who's writing the piece. And on the right there we have the ads, the digital and the print ads. Very controlled, very simple, clean messaging. The advertorial is the combination, and normally these features are clearly titled sponsored content, commercial or promotional feature, or a reader offer. Now, looking at the example in the center, the company profile is being financially supported by the ad that's above it. For the reader offer, there's definitely a collaboration between the magazine and the company, the travel company that's promoting its tours. And then for the competition example, there is no payment for this space, albeit it's a full page in a magazine, because it's based on offering a prize of a retail value prize that's significantly lower than the rate card value of the page as an ad. There is a synergy between PR and advertising. They're complementary, as they both can interact with each other very, very well. So public relations communications are designed to create awareness and build credibility with the audience. The content is very detailed and it's about storytelling, communicating a picture of your event, your business, your project, your product. Julie O'Brien would have gone through this in the storytelling webinar. So this is very much amplifying that message. As mentioned, budgets are very low, and as editorial coverage is free, there are no guarantees that they're going to use your story. PR will normally come ahead of advertising to lay the foundation and generate positive exposure. Advertising sells through with a controlled message, but you can use the placement of an ad to leverage for editorial control, for editorial coverage. And this can be negotiated by the advertising agency or the media buying company, and then followed up by the PR consultant. There is a growing trend towards an integrated approach, with PR increasingly managing media buying and working in tandem with these media buying companies to maximise the spend and the exposure. So now we know a little more about where PR sits in the marketing mix. The next question is, what exactly is it? The definition is the planned and sustained effort to establish mutual understanding between an organisation, be it a brand, a company, an event, and its public. These can be customers, clients, stakeholders. In one word, it's about communication. The words I'd like to point out here are planned and sustained. Ad hoc activity can be expensive, and it can also ruin opportunities moving forward. So designing a plan and working with your available resources and budget, even if it's only a once-off small campaign, it's going to be much more beneficial and will provide a foundation to build on. So what I'm going to do now is going to take you through a step-by-step of what is actually involved, so you can actually do it yourself. So let's look at the communication channels. We have internal, external, and community relations. So internal could be within your own organisation, external is outside, and community is within the community that you would relate to. So we have media relations. I've mentioned this across digital and traditional platforms of print, online, radio, and television. And within this then, we have media engagement, and this would involve press releases, one-to-ones, previews, interviews, sampling, desk drops. Then we move into event management, press conferences, launches, and openings, which we haven't had for the past year. And these, as we know, have pivoted online, and many of these events are now hybrids, where they have a combination of a live studio or location setup, and they're broadcasted virtually. Then we have experiential activations and stunts, festivals and events. These could be pop-ups, or two that I particularly like were at Electric Picnic a number of years ago, where Vodafone provided phone charging points, and Surf Detergent set up a laundry service for the revellers at the weekend. And they managed to get a lot of exposure across it. There's promotional activity, and these opportunities are across all platforms. You can have competitions on radio, in newspapers and magazines, and they're very, very cost effective, because many work on offsetting the media placement charges with a prize of a set retail value, or for example, a money can't buy prize like tickets to a sold out event. Then we have sponsorship, and this works in two ways, both from the event and from the sponsor's perspective. PR is instrumental in promoting both sides for a sponsored event. And social media, this is very connected with PR, because the PR content and messages are tailored to Instagram and Facebook posts. If you watch some influencers on their Insta stories, they'll be delivering PR-focused information, products, service, and events. And then we have exhibitions, workshops, seminars, and direct mail during the area. So what is the role of PR in your event or your festival or your business? Well, primarily it's to inform your key audiences or your target market about your business, your brand, or your event. It's to create awareness of your service, your brand, your product, your event offering. It's to increase and raise the profile of your business or event. It's to develop credibility by providing detailed information. It can help develop a personality for your event because you're communicating what it's about and what differentiates it from the competitors. Ultimately, it's to generate sales and inquiries and create a success for your event. And very importantly, PR activity, by the very nature of it, can support your efforts to support funding and sponsorship applications. I mentioned earlier that ad hoc communications can be ineffective and expensive. So it's important to develop a PR plan, no matter how small your budget or event is. Adopt a strategic approach and follow the who, where, why, what, when. Identify your key aims and objectives. What do you want to achieve? Why are you doing this? Who are you going to talk to? The audiences, the existing and the potential customers, or the community, stakeholders, sponsors. There are different demographics with male and females, for example, in an 18 to 24-year-old age bracket, 25 to 34, 35 to 54. And the different media platforms are orientated towards specific groups. So there's very little point in promoting, say, the Balsamic Music Festival to the over 60s in a newspaper because it just won't appeal to your audience. So you ask the question, where will I reach this audience? And then you start researching the media platforms that the audiences relate to, whether they're online, whether they're newspapers, whether they're magazines, podcasts, influencers. The choice is there. Then you ask, what newsworthy angles have I got to work with? You'd be surprised when you start to list out all the potential activities you can think of. You'll find a number that you can actually develop and leverage to attract the attention of the media. And then you say, why would the media be interested in this? It's how you package it, it's how you present it and put it to them. Who do you approach to promote my story? This is where you need to start researching the journalists, the right journalists for your story. Excuse me. Check out the different media channels and platforms. Use Google, read newspapers, make calls, find out. But keep in mind, you need appropriate media to be interested in your event. And then the big question is, how much can I afford the budget? This is the $1 million question. And as I said, PR function is a low, PR is a low budget function. Editorial coverage is free. However, there are production costs like photography that need to be paid for. Remember, you may be able to divert some budget from your advertising. And also for events, sponsorship is a real consideration. Sponsorship can come in financial or in-kind support and on different levels, from a main sponsor to a partner or associate sponsor. And there's also a media sponsorship. So this support can be used to help reduce costs and provide budget for PR activity. So each PR campaign, as with an event, has different stages. So we have a pre-event launch phase, we'll have the event phase itself, and then we'll have a post-event phase where you can get reviews and social coverage. As I mentioned, research all the newsworthy angles and otherwise create them. Work with your team to brainstorm ideas and concepts. Is it a launch of a new or existing event? It could be the save the date, announcement of a new venue. It could be the acts. It could be when tickets go on sale. It could be a significant anniversary, 10th anniversary of your event. You could be announcing a new sponsor coming on board. You could have developed an association with a local event at a community level. It could be a significant achievement by winning a prestigious award or won by one of your team. It could be a customer incentive. Or it could be a global activity that's been tailored to a local level, maybe a big international event that's coming to the city. The next step is to look at what media platforms you can approach to promote and amplify your message. Now it's time to start working up your media list. This is invaluable, and you can work with this list moving forward and update as new journalists come on board and others leave. Just looking across your newspaper landscape, there is a great selection in the province. You have newspapers and online platforms. And just to point out that local newspapers are very important for local interest angles, so be sure to connect with them. They do rely heavily on advertising revenue, so keep this in mind. And if there is any nominal budget available to spend, your event could benefit greatly in the long term. You have consumer, specialist and trade magazines and their online platforms. And most of the newspapers and magazines are continuing to develop the online platforms with everything going online, and they're fine-tuning them very well. These appeal to a younger audience because they can check their news feeds on their phones while they're on the move. These online platforms do have their own editorial teams that are different from your print platforms, so be sure to target these and include these in your media list as well. As I go back there, we have broadcast, includes television, the local and your main radio stations, and these are great platforms for interviews. It's literally like start listening and picking out where you hear the chit chat and what would suit your event. The social media platforms, again, your influencers, and these have followers from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands of followers, and many of these followers are so loyal. By simply inviting an influencer to your event, you can encourage them to do a post on their platforms that will potentially reach their followers. And the cost of the event is going to be just simply a pair of tickets. They're saying that they are charging a lot more, so it depends on your relationship with the influencer. And then you have direct mail and e-shops. And just a note on GDPR, just ensure that your lists are compliant. So this is just a snapshot of some of the media in the province that would have PR opportunities to follow up. There's a lot of local papers and platforms that I haven't included in there, but there is a plethora of media platforms to check out. So just to drill a little bit deeper into these media, so they have different house styles and styles of reporting. So it's very good to familiarise yourself with this. In print, there's the obvious broadsheet versus tabloid, and they have very different styles of reporting. So different stories will appeal to them, and in turn, how you approach the different formats, you'll tell your story accordingly. They also have different policies for crediting sponsors and brands in both editorial and photography. And this can create challenges for sponsorship because some media just won't use overly branded shots or press releases. So actually a point there is if you actually put the brand in the caption, you've a higher chance of actually getting your picture landed. Within the media platforms, there are different sectors and that will be relevant to your event. There's news, features, business, sport, photography departments. And with each of these, you'll find editorial teams with writers and editors who specialize in these areas. And within the features department alone, you'll find lifestyle, tourism, travel, hospitality, music, food, and importantly, the what's on sections. There are specific columnists, journalists, and freelance writers constantly looking for good quality information. And you'll see the names credited on many of the pieces, so take a note of these. Be sure to contact the right journalist and work to create a rapport and build a working relationship, as these relationships can last for many years. Here are some examples of platforms that would welcome content on events on an ongoing basis. Also remember there are people outside the province who are planning to visit and would like to know what's going on. So you have very valuable resources here, like the Discover Northern Ireland, Visit Belfast, a city region, Belfast Live, and as I pointed out, that the newspapers have sections that you can research and find out and take a note of. Last week, Julie O'Brien referred to low cost and no cost solutions in her commercial strategies presentation. PR is a low cost function. Editorial coverage is free. The costs involved are the time of the consultant in coordinating the elements and the tools such as photography. So we're now going to move on to media relations, which really forms the foundation of all PR activities. Here's an overview of some of the activities connected with media relations and that you could consider doing depending on the available budget. So press releases and photography, these are the foundations of media relations and form the basis of every PR campaign. If you had budget, I'd include a photo call if you can afford to do one and it's in the right context. We also have media educationals, which I referred to earlier, which are one-to-ones with the journalists where they experience something. It could be a visit to a hotel, to a venue, to a concert. We also have press previews, profiling of an event, profiling of people. We have case studies. Case studies, again, are all around human interest. And we have interviews with across print, radio, TV, and podcasts, which are increasing in popularity. I've mentioned promotional campaigns, and there's also desk drops. Now, these require a little bit of additional budget for the likes of delivery, but desk drops could literally be something, it could be something that's just dropped to a journalist's house and they open it up and then they would post on their social media channels, crediting the sender of it, be it the event. If there's budget available, and these do take a lot of budget, you can look at press conferences, media launches, whether they're virtual, live, or a hybrid, but they do take budget and they're not always necessary. The big question is how much can you afford to spend? And then identify what activities potentially will deliver the best return on that investment. The best way to do this is to working within your budget, develop a strategic plan of activity of how to generate coverage over a period of time to support your event. The press release. And this is the fundamental tool, as I said, working with photography. That's some very simple rules and it does take practice, but I think once you get the flow of it and you've written a few, it gets easier and you learn as you go. There's a few simple rules to follow. The inverted pyramid format. So information is written in descending order of importance. The journalist always edits really from the top down. So ensure all the important information is included in the first paragraph. We work on a principle of the who, where, why, what, when, and how. This can be challenging, but it is manageable. Keep your language clean and simple. Ensure facts and figures are correct. Keep it short and to the point. Normally 1 A4 page is all you need. Always include contact details and be contactable. If you have additional information, you can put them in the editor's notes at the end, or you can draft up a separate document, which could be titled background document to event, which can be sent as a separate attachment. Here's a template for a press release. Now it looks very straightforward, but in actual fact, this is the most valuable tool that you could have. We'll just go through it here. You have it signed as press release. You have your embargo date if you want the journalist to hold it for a day or 2 days. If it's for immediate release, you put immediate release. That means they can use it there. You've got a concise, attention-grabbing headline. And there is a trend towards using imagery. So you could pop an image in there to kind of animate the content. So I'll just read through it very briefly. I don't know how it's showing on your screens there, but it could be a bit small. But always include the 5 W's, the who, where, why, what, when, and how in the opening paragraph. The journalist needs to know why they should continue to read and what would be of interest to their readers. So make sure to include a newsworthy angle. Use the inverted pyramid triangle method to ensure that all the information that you want the journalist to include is featured at the start. This can then be expanded on in the second paragraph and followed by the less important and background information, which is tiered in order of priority. Remember, the copy will be edited from the top down. Space will be allocated, so if this is 200 words, it'll be the first 200 words that will be used. Write simply and concisely, avoid fluffy, descriptive language, and always ensure that facts and figures are correct. Also be sure to spell check it. Human interest stories provide strong angles, so include details on people that are involved in the project if they're relevant. Quotes from those can also be included. Try limiting the press release to one A4 page, typed into Homa or Verdana 11-point font with line spacing of 1.5. When you're sending it to the media, put the headline in the subject line of the email you're sending to the journalist and include the content of the release in the body of the email. Also attach the release as a Word document to facilitate editing. Photography can secure coverage, so attach 1 to 3 shots at minimum of 1 megabyte each, because this is perfect for reproduction, and no more than 8 megabytes in total. Alternatively, you can include a WeTransfer or Dropbox link in the body of the email to the photography. Always put the website a website address for the event, and then of course your contact details, who you are, your position within the event, and your contact email and phone number. So we have the press release, hopefully, and now we move to photography. And I think that old cliche, a picture speaks 1,000 words, always rings true. It's important that we have a photograph. It could be called a shot or an image, but if one is available, definitely send it with the press release. It gives content to the media channel, and it also helps to bring your story to life. Ensure you have copyright on the shots that you use or permission from the photographer. And always ensure that the photography is captioned. So this would be the name and the title of the actual JPEG, or it could be embedded inside in the JPEG. Now you need Photoshop for that. Photographer can do it for you, but that's why sometimes it's simpler just to literally put the name of the event in the title of the JPEG. I mentioned before about sending high resolution images of 1 megabyte each minimum and a max of 8 megabytes as attachments, because they might just get blocked by the firewall in the media platform. And larger files can be sent by WeTransfer or Dropbox links in the main body of the email. So we've lots of types of photography. You can have product shots, which could be location, they could be hotels, restaurants, food, artists, acts, or you can buy stock shots, which you can buy from a photographic library or from a photographer themselves. Or you can set up your own photo shoot to capture shots that you can use and use them going down the line. These can be expensive, so I would recommend being well planned when you're setting up a shoot. And there's also the photo call, which I think people are familiar with, which is set up to promote a specific purpose. So it could be the launch of an event, a press conference, or on the day of an activity. They're set up by booking a photographer who capture the shots, and then many of them will release into newspapers or media platforms. They'll also supply them to you, so you can send them into the media yourself. You can also use them for social purposes, for social media, right across the board. A photo call is really designed to set the scene that reflects what your event is all about. So it's up to you to coordinate the elements to create this shot. I did mention about heavily branding shots. Avoid them if you can. because media won't use them, and rely instead on including the brand in the photo caption. I've just put some protocol examples here on the next slide. To the left here, there's a gallery portal of one of the photographers, PR photographers, that I would use regularly. But it's just kind of giving you an example. That was kind of up 1 week. So this is an example of the work that he would have done. The photo editors can go in here and, you know, download shots and use them if they want. But you'll see really, I suppose, here that there is very little branding in them. You know, you've World Cancer Day and World Book Day and the Dublin Film Festival, and there's very little branding in those particular shots. But these shots, you know, they have a purpose and they can be used going forward. You can also use them for launches and for launching sponsorships and for social columns. So engaging with the media, we have the press release, we have the shots. The decision now is, are you going to go for a targeted or a general approach? And both can work, they both have different purposes. General issuing means sending the press release far and wide, and potentially it'll get the attention of some journalists somewhere. When you're doing this, always BCC all the recipients in the BCC section of the email, so no one else can see who else has got the release. However, I would really strongly recommend targeting individual journalists because it is better and it's more controlled and you can gauge the response. So there are times when it's good to issue a generic release, but I would definitely recommend that you take the targeted approach, identify and reach out to the media with a personalized approach. Remember, you are just one of many people sending in press releases. So do aim to stand out and understand that journalists won't always respond, but that doesn't mean that they're not interested. They may file the information away for use down the line. If you're offering an exclusive story, which is sometimes a very good way to do it, ensure that you only approach one journalist at a time and get their response before approaching the next journalist. Also, journalists work to deadlines, so ensure speedy responses if asked a question. As I mentioned earlier, email is the main form of communication, and clearly state the headline of the press release and the subject to attract attention. Personalize the greeting with a short introduction about why you're getting in touch, and include the press release in the body of the email. As I mentioned, also attach the press release as a Word document to facilitate editing, and send the photography as an attachment or a link. Follow up with another email in a few days if you haven't heard back, or you could try a phone call. But if they don't respond, leave it and try somebody else. So hopefully now we're starting to generate some coverage, and the next step comes to monitoring. So if you've issued your press release and your shots quite broadly across multiple platforms, monitoring from coverage can be very difficult and very time consuming. It means physically reading newspapers, scrolling through online sites, and trying to spot mentions wherever you can. I'd recommend, first step is to set up a Google alert with keywords. And this can pick up some, but not all of the online mentions, which is actually really helpful. But if you can afford to engage a media monitoring company to track print and online coverage and broadcast if it's relevant, it will be very, very helpful. These companies send daily alerts with the coverage that has appeared on the day, as you can see here on the right-hand screen. And when you click through these, you will get the actual clipping itself, and on the print it'll tell you the circulation figures, how many copies of the paper, the magazine it goes to. And if you click into the media monitoring system, you'll find the unique monthly visitors information. It's all there. This is really important because it does show the level of coverage that's been achieved as part of this campaign and the reach. At the end of the campaign, you can create a report that you can present to sponsors or funding bodies, but you have to start early and gather them all. The first step for these reports is to collate all of the press clippings that you've gathered, either into a Word document or into a PowerPoint presentation to visually showcase the coverage that has been achieved. This here is just a little example of part of a PowerPoint presentation that we have done for one of our clients. But literally you could have multiples of coverage that need to go up. So find the best way, whether it's a Word doc and then send it as a PDF or if it's a PowerPoint. Then create an Excel sheet. Now this is again where the hard work comes in, and a media monitoring company can actually collate a lot of this information. You can work with a formula, just develop a template yourself where you will list the publication, the date, circulation and the readership. And unique monthly visitors if it's an online platform. There's two types here. One is based on readership and unique monthly visitors, and the one on the right is based on advertising value equivalent. Now, I would preface this that the AVE is not recognized by the PR industry anymore. However, some clients still request it. The sample on the left is probably the one you should be following, particularly for sponsors. You'll see that just actually on the AVE as well here, it works on the rate card add value. That's why it's not really accepted. So if the page is £2,000, the rate card, the PR value uses a multiple of 3, which would suggest that it's £6,000. Whereas the reach in terms of readership and UMVs would probably be a much more accurate reading. You have this report then to present to your sponsors, to your bodies for funding. So it's a valuable tool to have. Finally, on events, and I couldn't really avoid this, particularly in light of COVID and the high element of risk, but there's always a possibility that something could go wrong. So it could be the cancellation of an event, an act pulls out, bad conditions, weather, traffic congestion, something negative. So with social media, and particularly Twitter, everyone is a citizen journalist and news travels very fast. And it's imperative that the event PR responds without delay. So one of the priorities ahead of the event is to put a crisis communications plan in place that would cover all the eventualities that you can think of. The plan really should be an A to Z of how to handle a media inquiry from the first call from the journalist to assessing the situation and then responding. Outline step by step of what has to be done and ensure that all of the event team are familiar with it. You have a list of the nominated spokespeople and contact numbers for all the key personnel to hand. When a journalist contacts, always respond and acknowledge the inquiry. This avoids creating a vacuum and then the media filling it with inaccurate information. Once the query is in a holding place, assess the situation, then prepare a short media statement controlling the key messages and respond back to the journalist. And if it needs to be issued wider, you can issue it wider to stop or to control the crisis. The statement may need to be updated regularly, so keep this in mind. But the secret is just always stay contactable because somebody could be back to clarify a point here or a point there. These measures hopefully will avoid a wave of negative publicity and possibly, in turn, create positive coverage for your event. In conclusion, I just want to summarise a few key points in engagement with the media. On the do's, research your media. Take a targeted approach and get to know what they want. Knowing your local media is a valuable resource that will be there for years. Build a good working relationship. Maximise publicity opportunities. Don't let something slip by you. If there's an opportunity, try, develop and work it. Check out all potential opportunities. Be proactive and always respond promptly. On the negative side, Never ignore a media inquiry or say no comment. That's just a no-no. As I mentioned there, that'll create a vacuum, and in turn then they'll fill that with some other comment or news. Don't pester journalists for coverage. If they haven't responded, let them. They may have filed the information away for further use down the line, but never pester. That also applies to sending press releases for the sake of press releases. If you haven't got a newsworthy angle, hold back, because seldom seen is much appreciated. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I have 2 pages of questions. So, so let's kick off if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Your presentation talked in parts about PR agencies, and it talked in parts about doing it yourself. So one of the things that's coming up is about how effective you can be in trying to manage your PR yourself, or should you always be going out and looking for a PR agency freelancer to look after that for you?
Okay, I suppose the secret really is you can have all the elements. You can have a good press release with a great news story, you can have super photography, and if you don't have the skills to distribute or target that information, it's a wasted opportunity. So I would suggest if you have somebody who has knowledge of the media, you'd be better going that route. So if it is a PR consultant, whether it's a consultant or a freelance PR, if somebody has that skills and they have the contacts and you can afford to use them, because PR is paid, it's a service. So you're basing your costs on your time. So if you can afford to pay somebody, absolutely. But saying that, you could have somebody that's, maybe does other functions within your event. Maybe they're responsible for marketing, and maybe they have a background in PR. It is a training, you have to train. So, but if you have kind of a flair for it and you're good at writing, yes, yeah, you can do it. As I said there, it's a step-by-step. So somebody really who has a very small event, who can't afford to, can actually write a press release and can actually pick up the phone and contact their local paper. That's absolutely okay, and they will get a response. That's why I'm saying there is a mix of both.
And I suppose leading on from that, and a lot of the events that happen across Northern Ireland are they're run by independent festival owners who that's what they do all year round. But their budgets are fairly tight. If you had £1,000, if you had £1,000 and you were going to spend it on marketing, would you be better spending it on PR than you would be on advertising?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. I mean, your £1,000 will buy you X space in X platform. So if it's a print platform, you definitely wouldn't buy anything on radio. You might get some value on online. That £1,000 could be used to target, 50 media platforms, and you could generate coverage on, say, 20 of them. So you've suddenly multiplied your investment by 20 mentions rather confining it to one specific advertising platform.
Okay. And quite a lot of questions coming in about influencers, and I think in some ways, in my experience, the influencer market here is perhaps a lot friendlier than it is in larger, outside Northern Ireland, and certainly there are influencers who are very loyal to businesses, loyal to certain genres of activity within Northern Ireland. I suppose one of the easy ones to engage with is influencers around food, and you know, for food events, it seems that there's quite a natural list of people who are interested in that kind of thing. I mean, I work on a variety of different food events. Belfast Restaurant Week, for example, okay, everybody loves to get out, especially now, loves to get out and eat, but there are definitely a core number of influencers who are right for that type of event. Do you think that influencers work for all types of events? So do you think if my event is music related, is it feels to me like it's maybe not quite so easy to find the right influencers then, that some types of events are better suited to them than others?
I think, yeah, I agree with you there. They can seem to pigeonhole into specific sectors. However, those sectors kind of, I find here, come under lifestyle. So if you have a food blogger, they also could potentially have an interest in an event. Absolutely no reason why not. It could be into a music event. And in fact, I have found over the years that they really do. So if they're issued or sent an invitation to attend a gig, you'll find the food bloggers very well could attend, and you would get the exposure to their audiences about your event. So they cross over. They have found, I suppose, niches that really serve them well, and they're fantastic if you really want to promote food related activities. But there's still potential there to promote anything, events of all types of nature, you know, if they're interested. In fact, we would have found that a lot of influencers down here are very beauty orientated. However, that they are super ambassadors for events, you know, and you'll find they will all come out together, which is even better. So you're literally extending your reach, you know, at an event.
And you talked earlier about the importance of relationships with journalists. You know, and in some ways, traditionally, that's what makes a good PR person, is somebody who has the relationships where they're able to pick up the phone and get that placement. I'm just wondering, in the way that traditionally you would have nourished relationships with journalists, do you think you need to do that in this day and age, do that with influencers? Do you need to be chatting to them on an ongoing basis?
Well, no. I think it's actually the whole dynamic has changed, and I think journalists now are very time poor, so they're all cutbacks, and you know, media is kind of consolidating, and people are working across 3 titles and not 1 title, so they're time poor. When I'm saying kind of a good working relationship, you might never meet this journalist, you might never actually even speak to this journalist, but they know you from your email, if you get me. So you're sending in, they respect your content, they see that they're going to get a well presented release with good information, nice shots. They'll ask you a question and you'll be back like a light, and that does them a service. So in turn they will work with the content. And the whole market, you know, for going way back, there was always this kind of disconnect between journalists and PRs, and there was kind of a bit of a relationship you know, either they were very close or was it one serving the other. That's gone. This is now really about good working relationships, where the PR on behalf of a company or an event is supplying information to the journalist. The journalist in turn will assess the information and see, can I use this in my column? Can I use this in my paper or my magazine? And that's where the relationship is. So as I said there, you might never meet a journalist unless you go to an event and host an event. And they don't all attend events either. So it's very much done between email and the occasional phone call.
Okay. A lot of discussion around photography as well. And events and festivals are obviously a very visual business. Whenever you're setting up a PR pick, should you, and you know you're sending it out with a press release, should you always be trying to tell the full story within the pic? And I suppose what I mean by that is, just in case your photograph gets covered, but your press release doesn't. I mean, which is it a balance between words and picture, or do you think the picture can do as much by itself as the words can by itself?
Well, I think the pictures, it's a competitive space, because I know even here now, not in these current times, because photo calls are only really starting to pick up again now. They kind of completely stopped earlier on. It's managing the branding within your photograph, because editors are looking for a stylish picture to put on the front of their paper. They don't necessarily want a lot of branding on that, so they will avoid using it. And some of them have house policies that will just say, no, absolutely not. So if you can integrate the brand in very cleverly, like we did one there for Grow More, which was a gardening initiative, and we had the kids wearing little aprons with the logo on the front, but that was fine, it landed everywhere, but it was quite subtle. Otherwise, you put it into the extended photo caption, because if the photographs get the attention of the reader, then they'll be drawn to finding out what it is, and then the information will be there. So it'll be, the event taking place on XXX, and if you're lucky, you might get the website put in there as well. But it really is finding the balance of creating a really nice visual. I think I used one shot there of little kids with daffodils in Ballymoney, and that was like, I don't know whether that was a stock shot or whether it was a photo call shot, but it just sat very well to explain spring and festival, and then all the information was underneath it. So, and that's really what you want,
Okay, perfect. I could talk all day, but we're running out of time, so we're just going to do a couple of things before we finish up. We're going to do a couple of live polls, and it'd be really great if everybody could take the time just to complete those before we finish. So the first question should be up in a second. There we go. So how have you found today's session so far in terms of content and relevance to your business? The scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not relevant at all and 5 being extremely relevant. So if you could vote now, that'd be great. And then the second question is, do you plan to take any action in your business as a direct result of what you've heard today? And for that, it's just a simple yes or no. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for doing that. So I hope you found this session useful. As I've said before, all the webinars are going to be made available online, and if you've registered today, you'll receive an email which will point you in the right direction of where to find that. That email will also give details of where to find the checklist for today. Those checklists are being produced as a kind of quick hints and tips guide, and also for something that you might want to share on your colleagues. As with all the presenters of these webinars, there are a limited number of opportunities for one-to-one sessions with Mary. So again, details on how to do that will appear in that follow-up email. And the final thing in that email, and those of us who work at events would say possibly the most important, is there will be a short evaluation form, and we'd all really appreciate it if you could take a couple of minutes just to fill that in. So again, thank you for joining us on this session. We hope you've taken away something useful, and we look forward to the time when we can do this in person one day again soon. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.